Yeah, I hope that you hearing me. This is the future, all about cybersecurity. Talking about the hackers, I'm just trying to warn you. From the one and only legend, the Cyber Informer. Hey, yeah, this is the Cyber Reformer. This is the Cyber Reformer. Let's go.
It's time for the Cybersecurity Business Connect and Protect Central Coast informational video. I am Michael Trimblett, the Cyber Informer, and today we'll be talking about the Essential 8's multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication can take a number of forms. In this video, we will show you the fundamental ideas behind multi-factor authentication and talk about issues that may arise from using it. Multi-factor authentication is a key aspect of the Essential 8. Multi-factor authentication relates back to confidentiality and integrity in the CIA triad and is designed to keep your online data secure. To read more about the Essential 8, go to https://loyalit.com.au/E8. This will redirect you to the government's website. Multi-factor authentication can be called two-factor authentication or three-factor authentication. Multi-factor, two-factor, and three-factor authentication can be abbreviated to MFA, 2FA, and 3FA. Before we get into too much detail, we'll need to understand a few definitions so we can then understand how this part of the Essential 8 relates to securing your data. Correctly configured multi-factor authentication is considered bulletproof for accessing accounts. We'll dive deeper into this in a dedicated multi-factor authentication video over in the premium membership area. Multi-factor authentication normally involves you entering your username and password and then using another factor to complete the login. The factors are something you know, like your password, something you have, like your phone, something you are, like your fingerprint. The Essential 8 recommends setting up multi-factor authentication for VPNs, remote desktop, SSH, and other remote access utilities, and for all users when they perform a privileged action or access an important data repository. If you haven't already, you should turn on multi-factor authentication for your bank accounts and anything else regarding your finances. The reason for this is that stronger user authentication makes it harder for adversaries to access sensitive information and systems. What are the multiple factors? So in a high security business, you may be asked to provide 2 or even 3-factor authentication. Something you know. This will be your username and password combination. If you have just a username and password, this is 1-factor authentication. Typically, multi-factor authentication will be something you know in combination with something you have and/or something you are. Something you have will be either a physical device such as a mobile phone, USB stick, key fob, or ID card. Think of this like withdrawing money from an ATM. You have your ATM card and your PIN. That's 2-factor authentication. Something you are is a biological factor such as your fingerprint, face or voice recognition, handwriting or retina scan. This is usually used as a 3rd factor where you swipe a card, enter a PIN, and then provide a retina scan to gain access to a heavily secured location. So why not just implement all factors immediately? Well, 2 reasons: expense and usability. As an IT consulting company, we always try to strike the balance between security and usability. Make the system too usable and security will suffer. Make the system too secure and usability will decrease, leading to user dissatisfaction. Higher security usually means higher IT costs because when changes are made, you will need the IT company to be involved to make even the smallest changes. When setting up networks, security is often an afterthought because budget is always a concern. Just make it work is a phrase we hear often when we get a brief from a client. As with everything, there's always a trade-off. The cons. Adding extra steps is annoying, especially if you're in a hurry or if you need to do a login over and over again, which can lead to loss of efficiency. When you set up your multi-factor device, often you'll be given a list of reset codes to recover your account. If you lose your device and you don't have those codes, then you need to go through the service's support to deactivate the 2FA device, log back into your account, then re-enable 2FA on your new device. It's a pain, but keep in mind if a hacker wants to access your account, they will have to go through the same thing. Remember, hackers tend to be lazy and go for low-hanging fruit. If you have multi-factor authentication set up on your account, they will likely move on to the next. Pros. It is almost bulletproof. Let me tell you a story of why I say it's almost bulletproof. We have a client who had their bank account hacked and around $10,000 was transferred. This business deals with large payments frequently, so the maximum transfer amount was set very high. The bank was merciful and gave them their money back under the agreement that they would use multi-factor authentication on their account. This multi-factor authentication was in the form of a notification to the phone, which they had to either accept or decline when a login was attempted. The person with multi-factor authentication set up on their phone had a notification come through at 2 a.m. It woke them up, and out of reflex, pressed the approve button, which was on their lock screen. A few days later, they were reconciling their accounts and realized a $20,000 transfer had happened a couple of days earlier. Unfortunately, it was long enough for the receiving account to send that money offshore, so the bank could not recover the funds. Because the account had multi-factor authentication set up on it, the bank washed their hands of the responsibility because it was an authorized login by the user. At a Gosford Erina Business Chamber luncheon back just before COVID hit, we had a talk by Matt Kraft, the Detective Superintendent Commander of the Cybercrime Squad. He told the attendees that as soon as that money has been sent overseas, there is no chance of getting it back. Sadly, in this case, the business lost the $20,000. This is why I say multi-factor authentication is almost bulletproof, because it comes down to how the holder of the multi-factor device handles notifications. How does multi-factor authentication keep you safe? For that, we need a propeller hat zone. This section is rated 0.5 propeller hats out of 5, as we'll be talking about the technical process of what happens when you enter a correct password and you have multi-factor authentication turned on. To enable multi-factor authentication, you download the Authenticator app to your phone. My preference is the Microsoft Authenticator. Register the Authenticator with the online service. The exact setup is different for every service, but usually found under Settings or a Security tab. There will be a how-to video in the premium membership, which will show you how to set up multi-factor authentication for an online service that uses notifications and one that uses a multi-factor code. Some services have their own authenticator, however, most use either Google's or Microsoft's, or both. This is the process when you have a multi-factor device that uses notifications. The correct username and password is entered from a device. The server sends a notification to the mobile device to ask if it was you. The user accepts the notification, which sends a signal back to the server to say, yes, it was me. The server then allows access to the requesting computer or device. This is the process when you have a multi-factor device that uses a code rather than notifications. Enter the correct username and password on a device. The server will then ask you for the code on the screen of your Authenticator app. This is what's called time-based authentication. It relies on the server and your mobile device having the same time. Behind the scenes, there is an algorithm that runs which will generate the same code at the same time on your device and on the server. Your device and the server will know the number, but the person logging in doesn't. That user must provide the code in order to prove that the user has the device. Remember, this is something you have. This code updates every 30 seconds. Enter the code on the screen. The server will know if the code is correct, and if it is, it will let you in. We're now exiting the propeller hat zone. Now we know how multi-factor authentication works. In the premium membership, there will be individual videos on each of the Essential 8 which will dive into each of the maturity levels and what you need to know to implement them. For the moment, all we need to know is there are 3 levels in each of the Essential 8 items. Maturity level 1, maturity level 2, and maturity level 3. To be fully aligned with multi-factor authentication, maturity level 3, we must conform to the following strategies. Multi-factor authentication is used to authenticate all users of remote access solutions. This includes anything that will allow remote access into your network, such as VPN services. Multi-factor authentication is used to authenticate all privileged users and any other positions of trust. Microsoft 365 and Azure allow for this to be configured very easily. If you use SharePoint Online, this is easy to configure. Sadly, Microsoft has deprecated their use of their multi-factor authentication service for internal networks in favor of their online Azure multi-factor authentication service. And as a result, if you want multi-factor authentication set up on internal networks, such as logging into a workstation, then a third-party system is required. Another requirement of maturity level 3 is multi-factor authentication is used to authenticate all users when accessing important data repositories. Very similar to the last point, but instead of key individuals having multi-factor authentication turned on, all users have it enabled. Another requirement of level 3 is multi-factor authentication uses at least 2 of the following authentication factors: passwords, universal second factor security keys, physical one-time password tokens, biometrics, or smart cards. This simply defines what multi-factor authentication is, so I think it's kind of redundant. In the premium membership area, we'll have a how-to video showing how to set up multi-factor authentication on a Draytech Routers VPN connection and in Microsoft 365. So we come to the end of another video. So what did we learn? Multi-factor authentication is almost bulletproof. There is a balancing act between security and usability. We saw how typical multi-factor authentication works. We heard a little bit about the maturity models for multi-factor authentication. Thank you for joining me for a look at multi-factor authentication. Don't forget, you can contact me via email, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Until next time, stay safe online.
Oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down like, oh yeah, this is the Cyber Informer. Hackers, you going down, yeah.